everyone. Welcome back to Astrology Today with Jeff Harman. Great to see you all as always. Gosh, there's so much intense energy. Jeff has been talking for a while about the energies and what's to come. He's going to reiterate it today. And it's really important that we don't get blindsided. So take it away, Jeff.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Yeah, clearly we are in dicey times. And again, I hope I'm wrong about that, but the more I look at everything that's been going on, not only in the global sense, but also in the United States charts, no question, we have seen a virtual roller coaster ride. Wouldn't you agree?
It's just unbelievable. I think I told you earlier today that I was in a Rite Aid and I was speaking to a cashier there. First of all, Rite Aid just filed for bankruptcy, which was a big shock, and they're closing down many stores, and Target's been closing down many stores. But when you walk around some of these places, you notice that the shelves are half full. The prices have skyrocketed. I mean,
yes, they have.
It's unbelievable.
It's interesting, you bring that up too, because I've been hearing the same thing from various different people in different businesses. I find that certain areas of construction are doing very well because a lot of old money is building houses or they're building things. But the new money and the growth in the middle class in general has been just stagnant. It's literally choking it off. And what's so dangerous here is they're not only increasing, or I should say decreasing, the availability of cheap fuel, which will choke off the middle class, and for that matter, all things in this country. It's raising the cost exponentially on all goods. When you have to pay so much money to process and ship, it's just raising the cost of all these goods. And here's the biggest problem. The Fed, during a deep recession, and I know the mind control news won't tell us it's a deep recession, but it is. And the housing markets are sideways. No one wants to purchase a house right now because the interest rates are going up. I'm hearing foreclosures and repositions on cars are off the charts right now. Why? Certain people have bought things at floating interest rates, hoping maybe they'd go down. Well, guess what? They keep going up. So they're not able to make the payments. So they go into foreclosure or repossession on many things. So it's just choking off the middle class. Another thing I've been hearing too that's very, very, not that I want to get this podcast into fear, but I think awareness is the key. And that's kind of what the topic is. I mean, we really want to say, hey, these are dicey times, probably more so than we've seen in an awfully long time. And the House of Cards is really built on a sandcastle even more because of all the things that have been going on for the last 3.5 years. You were mentioning earlier, Ella, too, about how the person in Rite Aid was telling you how all these foreigners are coming in and they're getting what, like $2,000 stipend, and they're trying to get jobs and they can't even speak English.
Crazy. And she was so upset because she's like, hey, I'm American. What about me? Basically is what she was saying. And she's concerned, really concerned, as most of us are. What's coming next? So yeah, these are dicey times, and the astrology mirrors it. The astrology, I always say, I love the astrology so much because it truly acts as a guide. And for this podcast, I feel like it's great to put out this kind of information just to, encourage people to be aware. Like you were telling me, stock up on water. And actually, I'm going to do it in a different kind of way, right? Like putting water in a barrel and have it. God forbid something insane happens, and it could.
Oh, yeah. I mean, people don't realize if we get a cyber attack or we get some type of an electromagnetic pulse, which could also come from the sun too. But if that ever happens, I can tell you right now, you will find everything will come to a screeching halt. You won't be able to pump gas. You won't be able to get food. Do I think it's going to get to that point? I don't, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some very powerful violence and activity. One of the things that I've heard recently is they've been interviewing a lot of these young men that are coming across the border. And some of them say that they're actually brought in by the UN. Imagine that. Well, why would that happen? Well, I don't think you're ever going to get Americans to, fire on Americans, especially the populace. And unless, of course, we're doing crazy stuff in writing. But there's a lot of lore right now that they're attempting to create a lot of dissension coming up here. And this would fit the astrology. I've been saying repeatedly, we have primary directed, or solar arc is the proper term that astrologers would know, which just means each planet advances 1 degree per year, or any percentage thereof, from the birth chart of a nation or a person. And I have found them to be exceedingly accurate. Well, right at the end of this month, we have a confluence of things going on. And I should also mention tomorrow morning, which is, of course, depending on where you are in the world, we're going to have Saturn station and go direct. It's already stationing right now. In fact, technically, Saturn will go direct at about 2:41 a.m., and that's Pacific time. So if you're on the East Coast, add 3 hours. If you're in Europe or Australia, add according to where you are. But see, Saturn stations in the sky and then goes direct. Well, what does Saturn rule? Structures, also release of karma. And this whole thing in Israel, I mean, we're seeing Hamas and Hezbollah and Iran. They're out and out making declarations. People in the United Nations, speaking of which, are making declarations that, you know, it's unacceptable what Israel is doing. And they're, you know, declaring that they're going to come back after Israel. Well, where is this going to go? Israel's not going to roll over, and neither is the United States. So we're seeing an Islamic jihad go against the state of Israel and the United States. And this could have repercussions all over the globe. And this, again, is something that has gone on for a long, long time, close to 2,000 years plus. There's been infighting over these religious beliefs and, of course, where everything is at. So it's very dangerous. Another interesting thing that I was looking at here, it's called the Balfour Declaration. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but the Balfour Declaration was actually put in, I think, in 1917 it was signed. And what that is it's essentially the declaration that Israel registered itself in 1947. And I've been mentioning the astrology that Israel's chart from 1947 has a Pluto squaring the moon. And, you know, squares are always sources of contention. It's like traffic. It's always causing problems. And we've got over the next 2 years, Pluto squaring the Israeli Mars. Now that one's trouble. And that's going to be increasing and increasing and increasing over the next couple of years. So this Balfour Declaration was believed to expire on October 31st. So this is an interesting thing because what's happening is now they're saying it has to re-register as a corporation. Now, I don't know the ramifications, but it's just interesting why China is taking Israel off the map and other places are not recognizing Israel. So there may be something to this, and the rabbit hole goes quite a bit deeper. This is a very dangerous situation. We're seeing many countries polarize on one side and the other. Not a good situation. And with the transit, speaking of which, Saturn going direct, see, Saturn is going to station right, or it has been stationing right over the United States moon. So you can see here, right here, Saturn, you can see, is literally stationing right as we speak. That's November 4th right there. And notice the little circle with the line up. That's what astrologers use to indicate a conjunction. So Saturn has been standing over the top of the United States moon. If you follow these dashed lines over here to the far right, that's the United States birth chart planets. And the computer extrapolates this. It's a really wonderful tool to be able to see when aspects happen. Well, you can see here, Saturn has been standing over the top. That's actually called a station, which is so much more intense when that happens, when hard aspects happen. Now, to you Vedic astrologers or people who are familiar with Vedic astrology, this is referred to as Sadhisate. Sadhisate is a strange word in Tamil and Sanskrit that means the 7.5-year period during which Saturn transits the sign before the moon of a person or a country, the sign over the moon, and the sign after. You can actually see here, this is what we would call the Southern Indian or Nadi birth chart of the United States here. And what's interesting about this is you can actually see Saturn in the outer box, which is, of course, these are the transits, is right over the US moon. The sign before is Capricorn. The sign over is Aquarius, and that is Pisces. So this Saturn takes about 2.5 years to go over a sign. So right now it's in the 2.5-year sojourn of Saturn right over the United States moon, which is in Aquarius. Here's more. So that graph that I showed you before shows it a little bit more plain, where we can actually see the station right over the top. But there's something many astrologers have been mentioning, and this is when the moon's nodes, which is known also as Rahu and Ketu, change signs, especially going from a fire sign to a water sign, or a water to a fire. That's known as a strange word called Gandanta. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Well, it's very volatile when you go out of a fire or water to fire, because they're very abrupt, unlike elements, and they have great, great power. And this is more energy that's really kicking in on the United States. So, and on the world in general. In fact, this is an exacerbation that I would say is probably going to really start to flare up even more in the Middle East as more tension gets happening here. And I can tell you another thing that I don't like at all is not only do we have Saturn going over the moon, but this K2 now will go over the United States Saturn right at the end of the month at the exact same time that the United States has its moon conjuncted by the solar arc Mars. Plain English, dicey times. For anybody who's said, okay, that's a lot of technical stuff, which it is, how do we boil this down into plain English? Really volatile times. Again, not here fear-mongering, but I think it's extremely wise to stock up on a little fuel, stock up on food, stock up on some extra things. Be prepared, protect your loved ones, and be aware. Now, hopefully nothing will happen. I hope we're, talking here on the holidays and it just blew by with nothing. But I wouldn't expect that. Let's hope it does. And let's hope it's nowhere near as severe as what the astrology is indicating. But it shows dire times. And again, if we flip the coin here and we look at what is our learned leaders doing? Well, they're raising interest rates. They're choking off the energy supply under the guise of course, the climate fear. And worse yet, we're seeing crime flooding this place, and the borders are being flooded. Literally a stampede. And there is great fear on the DOJ and also the FBI. I'm actually speaking to someone in the government later today, which is going to be really fun, but I wish I did it before the podcast. But it'll be interesting because I always get tidbits. They can't say a lot, but they say a little bit. And fun stuff, because we are clearly in a time where I would say this is very dangerous. Another thing, the Pluto return is going to be coming into orb, and it starts when? Right here. See, if you follow straight up, you'll see these are the months. See, that's right in February. The Pluto return, the first Pluto return in the sidereal zodiac starts right there. In fact, here, I can even put the date on here. Starts right around February 21st. Comes back again next July, and the final hurrah is literally at the end of 2024, which, of course, we all know is the election year. So astrology just doesn't happen all at once, though the triggers can seem like that. But we're in the orb of influence of the Pluto return. And remember, I said, brutal Pluto. Pluto is the destroyer. It literally burns things to the ground, if you will, or it transforms them to where you're either the phoenix coming out of the ashes or rising out of the ashes, or it's utter destruction. And again, America has a lot of infrastructure. It's very powerful. We have seen, so much go on this country over the last, 247 years. It's been some really great people who have given us roads, infrastructure, cities, and just a plethora of infrastructure that I don't think any country has ever had quite the way this one has. So it's strong, but boy, they are really hammering away at it. And if we start getting terrorist attacks where any really powerful weaponry is used, we could see that infrastructure be damaged or severely damaged very quickly, especially if certain modern weapons start getting used, and not just nuclear, but we're talking electronic pulse, magnetic pulse weapons, directed energy weapons, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all grave dangers that are on the horizon right now. And again, this administration doesn't seem to have a lot of interest in showing the strength. They're certainly doing it, but not to the degree that we would like to see in deterring all this stuff that's going on.
Yeah, yeah. So when we talk about not getting blindsided, what can we do to, well, obviously we know we need to stay aware. We need to be prepared with food and water and all that stuff, but also we need to watch our money, right?
Got to watch the money. Exactly right. I just got a notice today. I'm going to put that on the screen where literally we're being warned that deposits that are being made right now could be delayed because the banking system is really having trouble right now. This is scary stuff. This is why many people are flocking to precious metals, whether it be, silver, gold. I mean, in historically throughout history, every time a fiat currency has failed, gold, silver, and platinum have stood the test of time. And I personally think it's a good way to go. I'm not sanctioning. I can't give, advice, but I've had people ask me about certain cryptos and about certain things, and I'll tell them what the chart says. And I do get these are probably going to withstand any major impacts that happen because it certainly looks to me as though the owners at the top of the pyramid are rocking the boat right now. They want to put a new system in. And I think, I've been saying it forever, I think we have a war, a secret war that's going on at the top of the pyramid between the globalists and the nationalists. And that really came on the radar screen right in 2020. It actually started a little bit sooner than that. I'd say back around 2015, 16. But it's been some really crazy events that have been going on here. And I'm really hoping that the angels of this country and the astrology that I see show between now and 25, we're going to come out of the woods. And the Vedic astrology and the Nadi astrology actually shows that's a high probability. But make no mistake, between now and then, we may feel like it's not going to happen. Because it's always nice to hear someone say, oh, there's hope at the end of the tunnel. But you got to go through the tunnel. And sometimes that tunnel is pretty dicey. Let's hope it's not. But I think, it's great that you brought up what you brought up, Ella. And that is, I think we got to look at a number of fronts. It's great to have, keep some medical supplies. It's always a good idea, no matter what, to keep, first aid. We're in the land of earthquakes. So it's always a great idea to keep first aid kits around, keep a little, antibiotic ointment and splints and stuff like that. My son just, cracked his ankle not too long ago, bad sprain. And thank God I got him comfrey root, and he wrapped the comfrey root. And the doctor was like, wow, that stuff really works. He said, you're healing up extremely fast. So there's a lot of things we can do just planning. This is a time I would not operate as business as usual. Keep your cars full. You got to really be careful storing fuel. And a lot of places won't let you do that because it's exceedingly dangerous. You have to have special vents and all that type of stuff. So it's very dangerous. But I really, if there's a major war coming out, it could really be a problem. And one of the things people have been asking me about is conscription. Is Biden going to put the draft in? I don't get right away, but it could happen. I have to say, this would be an irritating situation. And I've seen reports that the conscription would be somewhere between 18 and 26. And we've been seeing a lot of advertisements on the internet. Many of you have probably seen it, where they're actually offering seniors really good bonuses to join the military. Remember the old the old cycle. They say prosperity, recession, depression, and war. And I think we've been a very sustained, you could say, recession that has been staved off. I mean, I've worked with a lot of people in the stock market with astrology, and I have some good friends in that too who are astrologers. And I could tell you, we used to nickname it the plunge protection team. The Fed literally has a plunge protection team. That's what we nicknamed them. So when the markets really go to crash, which they do a lot, they stop them out, they just shut them down, and the next day they just flood the money and the bonds through the door and prop it right back up. And everybody goes, oh, look, the stock market's back up today. So it's not a real indicator. And banks are in big trouble, in my opinion, right now, really big trouble. And the Fed is always shoveling more money in to keep it all going. And we've got some people at the top of our government who are literally looting the treasury. They're literally bankrupting the country. They are borrowing more money in ratio than any time in history of the existence of this country. So this is a very dangerous time. And another thing, it's good to have a little petty cash around, and protect your family. You got a lot of ways to do that. It's a time where I wouldn't be leaving your doors unlocked. I would be very wary of people around, because if something ever really breaks out, and it could, your local police will be overwhelmed, especially the ones that are underfunded. They'll want to help, but it may be every person for themselves if it ever gets to that point, which hopefully it won't. But I do get this is dicey times.
Yeah. Yep. For sure. Well, you were talking about metals. Gold's gone up. Silver's gone up.
Bitcoin, Ethereum came up good. I've had a number of people ask about that. It'll fluctuate up and down, but those are things that are good. Again, you got to be careful, because again, the banking system, we're all going to have to end up in USD. You can't walk into a grocery store or a gas station and buy gas with Bitcoin or Ethereum.
Not yet.
Right? Not yet. But I don't know they're going to let that one happen too easy. So,
right. You never know.
Sam Bankman-Fried just got convicted with that whole FTX thing. He could face up to 106 years in prison, according to the charges.
Wow. What's so interesting about everything that we're talking about, I just feel like it's a big plan. It's all been planned, by the owners. We always call them the owners, but it just feels like that. It feels like it's all planned out.
Yep. They seem to fund every war. They seem to be on both sides of the fence, and they do it through the back doors. And I think this is exactly what's happening. Look at the transparency of Iran right now. I mean, they have been allowed to pump oil like crazy. Their sanctions have expired. And again, we're seeing nothing but money flow to these very dangerous organizations. So, and again, they're funding both sides of the fence. It looks like a roller coaster ride to me. It really does, especially when we start getting into the summer of 2024. This is, this Pluto return is nothing to, sneeze at. It's really powerful. And I have heard that there is a lot of undercurrents going on with forces that have been brought into this country and undermine it. And clearly there's some pretty strong evidence, it's like George said, nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care until something happens, until something collapses, or there's, an outbreak or some attack. And then it's too late to prepare. So it's always smart to do that anyhow. If you live in earthquake country, or like we do, or you live in other areas where there's tornadoes, etc., it's always a wise idea to keep yourself prepared with a good emergency kit, stock up on your fuel if you can do it safely, and keep yourself well positioned. It's a good thing to have antibiotic creams. I mean, you get cuts and you can't get to an emergency care center, and that can happen easily in earthquake country out here. You need to be able to take care of yourself and keep wounds and stuff clean. So it's a good thing to be aware of. There's some wonderful first aid kits on the internet. You can jump on and check them out, and it's a good thing to be aware of all around. Just
Well, thanks, Jeff. I know you're really, really busy. Thank you so much for this. Thank you, everyone, for watching, for joining us this week. Take good care of yourselves, and we'll see you next time on Astrology Today with Jeff Harman.